So Michael Conforto's career with the New York Mets has likely come to an end as he has declined the qualifying offer and will become a free agent. On today's show, I'm going to talk about how Scott Boras is Bandbox shopping for Michael Conforto to find a new hitter-friendly haven for the former Mets outfielder.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, we will discuss Michael Conforto declining the qualifying offer. He is now going to be a free agent. And I want to talk about how Scott Boras has been shopping for a new bandbox for Conforto to hit in. In the first segment, I'll talk about how Boras really plays into this free agent decision, where he could go with Conforto, why he makes the moves that he makes with his clients to set them up to get as much money as possible. Go through some of the precedent there. And the main one that we'll talk about throughout the show is Nick Castellanos, who just cashed in on a bet by Boras by factoring opt-outs into his contract and planting him in Cincinnati. Castellanos looks to reap massive benefits this offseason. I believe he has a similar plan with Michael Conforto. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. And I will have a piece to go along with this podcast as well, talking about Conforto's free agency now. And basically, if you look at this past season, you can't say that this was anything other than a massive disappointment for Michael Conforto, Scott Boras, the whole group, because he was supposed to be the top free agent outfielder on the market. I mean, he was supposed to be in that same class as Corey Seager and Max Scherzer and Chris Bryant as this top tier of a free agent that Boras could shop to get those big 9-figure contracts he loves so much. And when it comes to the outfielders, he was supposed to have a better season than Starling Marte, who is 4 years older, 5 years older than Michael Conforto. He was supposed to have a better all-around year than Nick Castellanos, who doesn't have the glove defensively. And really, he was supposed to be that consensus top outfielder. When you think about the season Michael Conforto had in 2019, where he set career highs across the board, had over 30 home runs, over 90 RBIs, was out there for over 150 games, played great defense. That was a player we thought he was going to be. And then 2020, shortened season where everything was put under a magnifying glass. He puts up a, 158 WRC plus, which was a remarkable feat. WRC plus, again, weighted runs created plus, that measures league hitters based on an average of 100. So 158 means that Conforto was 58% better than the league average hitter in 2020. He looked like a bona fide superstar. And really, in some respects, this is where Boras maybe cost him, because the Mets probably should have been pursued aggressively by Conforto's team at the time to get an extension off of that season. I don't know if any talks ever happened. It didn't seem like anything got far down the road, because Boras is always going to push his guys to free agency, because that is where he can set up that bidding war, right? That's where he can get a couple of different owners on the phone. A lot of times he goes above the head of the GMs or the president and goes straight to the guys cutting the checks and says, hey, this is your free agent that is going to give you that World Series. If you're a 75-year-old owner who wants to win a World Series before you die, hey, if you sign my client, that's going to happen. That's what Scott Boras does. That is how he gets so much money out of teams like the Nationals. We saw that for years. Now that they have the World Series, maybe they are not going to still be shopping the way they once did. But there are a lot of teams out there that are going to get a call from Scott Boras. He's going to say, my client is going to be the one that's going to put you over the top. He's going to call Seattle up, say, hey, you want to finally break through and make the playoffs for the first time in all these years? Michael Conforto, Washington native, you better give him $150 million. And if he doesn't get this crazy contract, that is where we'll get to the real strategy for Boras's team of trying to set him up in a hitter-friendly ballpark on a contract where he can opt out after the first year, after the second year. Hell, if he can do a 4-year deal where he gets that long-term security or a little bit of long-term security and throws opt-outs after every season, that's exactly what he's looking for. If you look at what Scott Boras has done in the past, I mean, you have Bryce Harper, right? Complete ego play of a contract. Gets $330 million from the Phillies, $30 million more than Manny Machado got from the Padres, but 3 extra years. So the average annual value was not as good, but he got the biggest deal ever. And that's all that matters. We're talking about an agent that at one point set the bar for what Alex Rodriguez would make at $252 million. Why wasn't it just 250? Because Kevin Garnett in the NBA had a $126 million contract and they wanted to double it. There is so much ego in play with Scott Boras. And you know what? As much as everyone hates the guy, it's what makes him great at his job as far as getting his clients paid. And I'm sure when A-Rod gets 252 or Garrett Cole gets 324, I don't think any of them have anything bad to say about Scott Boras because at the end of the day, gets him paid, and that's really what you want as a professional athlete. You want to get as much money as possible. You want to maximize your earning potential. And so if there is a huge contract for Conforto this offseason, I'm sure he'll sign, and he'll sign with whatever team is offering that contract. But if that contract is not on the table, if the 9-figure deal is not there for Conforto, that is where he'll get creative. With JD Martinez, this is one of the first examples we saw of really structuring in opt-outs to heavily incentivize a deal. For Martinez with the Red Sox in 2018, 5-year, $110 million deal, opt-outs after the second and third season. Nick Castellanos, who we're going to spend a lot of time talking about on today's show, opt-outs after the first and second season. So the opt-out is going to be crucial to Conforto's free agency to get that deal, but there is still a chance. And that's what I wanted to start off with, that maybe he might just get that big deal outright. I don't expect that to happen, but I want to explore really quick why it could. Because you're talking about Starling Marte, the top free agent outfielder. We spent a lot of time talking about him on this show the last couple of weeks. 33 years old, right? That is not necessarily a great sign for him to go into free agency and get a 6-year deal because of that age. So Conforto, younger, might draw a little bit more attention on a longer-term deal. Nick Castellanos, the defense. Conforto can play a competent to above-average right field. That is going to be attractive to a lot of teams. Then you get to Avisel Garcia. Had a better season than Conforto, but nowhere near as long of a track record. Outside of that, maybe you're looking at Chris Taylor, but he's more of a super utility guy. So when it comes to starting level outfielders that can provide you above average production offensively and defensively, I really look at this class and say it's only Marte and Conforto. And if that's the case, being the younger free agent, maybe that big deal is still on the table. Ultimately, I think he has to settle for the Castellanos type deal, and that's what I'm going to talk about in just a minute. BetOnline is back and better than ever, now featuring a new web interface for the start of the basketball season with more props, odds, and lines available than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today. You'll also receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code LOCKEDON. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. So Nick Castellanos is really the blueprint that I believe Scott Boras is going to try to follow when it comes to Michael Conforto if he doesn't receive that outlandish $150 million contract that I'm sure they're going to start out looking for. They're going to go out and they're going to say, all right, let's just get the deal now, right? If you can get that 9-figure huge contract that pays Conforto north of $20 million a year over 6 or 7 years, by all means, just sign the deal now. But I think for Conforto, The play is really to retest the market next offseason. He had a bad year. He can hit free agency again next year, going into his age 30 season, still in the middle of his prime. He can follow the Castellanos blueprint. And for those of you who don't know, Nick Castellanos was a free agent after the 2019 season, and he got traded that year, so no qualifying offer attached. But in that first part of the season, the first 100 games that he played with the Tigers, you're talking about a player who had a WRC plus of 106. He was just a little bit better than league average. He had 11 home runs. Then in 51 games played with the Cubs, he hit 16 home runs, WRC plus over 150. Suddenly, he is of great value. And Boras, of course, probably tried to shop that narrative, hey, look, this is the guy he really was. Comerica's huge. You can get him now, and look what he can bring to your ball club. He can be a middle of the lineup bat, and he probably put all the stats out there, the 16 home runs, sign the guy to the massive deal. Well, nobody was biting. So what did Scott Boras do? He said, all right, well, we're going to plant you at Great American Ballpark. We're going to plant you at that hitter's haven, that just glorious ballpark that every hitter just goes into licking their chops. You're going to get to call that home for 81 games, and you're going to put up some gaudy numbers. We're going to structure an opt-outs. And so once you have that monster year that we know you're going to have, boom, time to hit free agency. And that's what happened. It was a 4-year, $64 million deal. Castellanos plays out the first 2 years of it, has the huge career year this year, 140 WRC plus, 34 home runs. It is time to cash in, opt out. Now, who knows what he's going to get, right? There's Mets fans just based on 1 year in a hitter-friendly ballpark. They're ready to give the guy $30 million a year and say he's the answer to all their problems, because that is how recency bias works. And that is how a 100 RBI season is seen, not only by fans, but at times by front offices. And so what Boras's team's going to try to do with Conforto is capitalize on that. They want to plant him somewhere where he can be awesome. Now, the one thing I'll say is I wanted to see, like, what is, his track record at Citi Field? What are his career numbers? Because, there was an argument to be made that he could have accepted the qualifying offer, come back to the Mets, played out one more season where he's comfortable, where he spent his entire career, and then hit the market again the same way. Is he going to get more than $18.4 million a year next year? I think there's a good chance that he gets, if not more than that, at least close to it. I honestly do think that he might get 20. But regardless, when it came to his play at Citi Field, why would you want to move him out of there if he was a great hitter in that ballpark? And honestly, you look at the home road splits, this guy remarkably consistent throughout his career. 66 home runs at home, 66 home runs on the road. He had a 256 batting average at home, 254 on the road, 361 on base at home, 352 on the road, slugging percentage of 472 at home, 465 on the road. You look at the WRC plus, 134 at home, 115 on the road. So Conforto has been a better offensive player at Citi Field than on the road. But if you're Scott Boras, if you're this team, right, and you're looking at a ballpark in Citi Field that is still a pitcher's friendly park, and you're saying, all right, well, he got acclimated there. It was home for him. He hit. He'll hit anywhere. But if we plan him in Fenway, if we plan him in Cincinnati, although they're not spending any money now, they're trying to sell everyone apparently. So maybe I got to hit up Jeff Carr of Locked On Reds and do some crossovers where we start talking trades, because that is a dumpster fire right now. But I digress. Maybe it's Chicago. Maybe it is, the Yankees, short porch in right field. Don't know if that is ultimately where it goes. Maybe it's Philly. And I still sort of think that would just be the ironic and likely landing spot for Conforto when it comes to a Mets fan's anguish. But the point stands that if you plant Conforto in one of these hitter-friendly ballparks and he hits 40 home runs next year, boom, he can then opt out of that deal, test free agency, and get the 9-figure deal he covets and be one of the top free agents on the board. Who knows? Conforto has a great season considering the success he's had up to this point in his career. If he shakes off the 2021 year, proves that was nothing, proves it was just a season where he dealt with a really bad hamstring injury and just could never find himself, and has just a monster 2022 campaign. All of a sudden, the $200 million contract that we were talking about prior to this season, once again, does not seem as outlandish. So that is the general idea I see right now when it comes to Conforto and his free agency. That's what I think they're going to be shooting for. And for some reason, as I just alluded to, I feel like that has him going to Philly. I really do. And I hate to bring this up, Mets fans. I do. Michael Conforto going to the Phillies is the worst outcome out of all of this, right? If there's one team that Mets fans hate, it's the Phillies, right? The Braves just won a World Series. Of course, Mets fans hate the Braves. The Phillies, it's almost because they're so close in makeup to the Mets. Like a Philly fan and a Mets fan are kind of the Spider-Man meme. I hate to say that to you guys, but it's true. It's diehards, it's loyalists. You will live and die by your team, and you hate anyone who opposes you. And that's why, I mean, these fan bases butt heads. But Conforto going to Philly, it makes a lot of sense. I hate to say it, it makes a lot of sense. Look at his career numbers. Michael Conforto, 53 games played at Citizens Bank Park, 279 batting average, 356 on base, 569 slugging, 15 home runs, the only ballpark outside of Citi Field where he's hit double-digit home runs, 42 RBIs. He's been great playing in that ballpark. He loves to play in that ballpark and have a spot open. They did not pick up their option on Andrew McCutchen. So I could see it. I could see Bryce Harper and Michael Conforto being teammates. I really could. And the only interesting thing there is how much money is he going to make, right? Like, what is the expected salary for a Michael Conforto? I would not be surprised if it was something along the lines of maybe 4 for 75 that he got. This is just a gut prediction here, where maybe the first year he gets 20, second year he might get something along those lines as well. I could see a front loaded deal where there's more money in the first 2 years, and that's the prime time where he'd be opting out of a contract. And really just comes down to how many teams are bidding for his services. And that's what Boras is going to try to do right now. He's going to try to pin a bunch of these teams together and say, who wants him? Here are our terms. If there's not that $150 million deal on the table, it's all right. Well, we want opt outs and we want the first year salary over $20 million. And then you'll work from there. And whichever team's most motivated to grab him will. I just think Philly is a team that just makes a lot of sense to not only bring in Conforto to pair with Harper, but to take him away from the Mets. I think that's something that they relish. And I think they know he'd perform very well in that ballpark. So it would be a wise signing by them if they ultimately decide to go that route. But Michael Conforto likely not back with the Mets. I would say that there's always a chance, right? If whatever this new front office is and whoever is making decisions, if they ultimately look at the market and say, the best way to replace Michael Conforto on right field, just bring the dude back. You know, that's still an option. And maybe the Mets can structure a contract that Boris's team likes, and maybe Conforto is motivated to return. To me, though, considering the way Michael Conforto handled that last series at Citi Field, the emotions, the tears, it just felt like a player that knew his time was spent in this organization, that he was not coming back. And I think it really has a lot of different factors that play into why Conforto will no longer be a Met. I think partially there is some fatigue here amongst fans and maybe even some in the front office with Michael Conforto not really meeting the expectations that were once set for him. So maybe there is that pull to move on another direction. The Mets do have to shake this team up, and maybe signing a Starling Marte as opposed to a Michael Conforto just makes sense to change the identity, to get a little bit more defense, a little bit more speed, maybe a little less pop, but have a right-handed bat in the outfield to pair with Brandon Nimmo. So maybe that is the direction that they're looking. I really don't know. But I also think from Boras's perspective, which is probably the bigger motivated factor here, I think that he believes that another team will make Michael Conforto better than he has been as a Met. I think there's still that perception that Boras holds that the Mets aren't the best landing spot for one of his players to flourish. That is not where you want your guy to be if they're going to perform at their best. And honestly, for a guy with the makeup of Michael Conforto, I do see him as being a player that in a smaller market could really thrive. I could see him where he doesn't have to deal with the same media attention, the same scrutiny, just be able to get back to his roots and play the game and really thrive. And ultimately, I will be rooting for Michael Conforto, whatever he lands. He was nothing but a great teammate, a great leader, a great player as a Met, a great homegrown talent. He'll finish in the top 10 in some different categories. He certainly was one of the best left-handed power hitters the Mets have ever had. And part of that is because the franchise hasn't developed a ton of them, but he certainly lived up to what you would want out of a first round pick. He helped the Mets make the World Series in 2015. He had some really good years mixed in, and he will be missed. So hopefully, Michael Conforto signs outside of the NL East. That might be the best you can hope for when it comes to his free agency. But anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, I will be writing up an offseason outlook for justbaseball.com when it comes to the Mets, and we will be going through that piece. What should the Mets be trying to do this offseason? What are the holes? How they address them? We've talked about it a lot, but I would be coming up with a clear, concise plan of what I would like to see the Mets do. So make sure you tune into that. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. My guy RM Layton has you covered for all of the latest when it comes to the stars of tomorrow. Follow Locked On MLB Prospects wherever you get podcasts.